My name is John Passfield. The title of this reading will be L.M. Montgomery, Video 14, The Reflective Journal. Here is my novel, L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, but I'm not going to read from the novel this time. I'm going to read from the journal that I wrote while writing the novel. Instead, I will read from the journal, which I wrote while I was polishing the complete draft of the novel. So here is the journal. I'll just hold it up. This is the physical copy, held together with elastics. The cover is deliberately fuzzy. A novel emerges out of the fog as you work on it. So at this stage, which for the journal is the polishing stage, you don't quite know what the novel is. It's like a ship or a lighthouse emerging out of the fog. Eventually, it will all be clear. That's when the last word of the novel has been polished and finalized, and that will be as clear as the picture on the front cover of the novel. So this journal is 53,000 words and covers all the topics that a writer thinks of while spending a month or 6 weeks polishing a novel. The journal is available for free on my website at johnpassfield.ca. I'm going to read 5 passages from the journal, so I've recopied them because I don't want to take the elastics off that bundle of paper. But it's on my website if you just click on that icon. Number 1, first section from the journal. The first idea for a novel on the topic of L.M. Montgomery came to me on Sunday, May 20th, 2018, which is now a year and a half ago. Well, it's actually now, as I'm reading this, 5 years ago. I had completed my novel about my dad, Cyril Passfield out west, so I'll just hold that novel up. So I just finished writing this novel. That's my dad kneeling down. His friend Charlie is there. Summer 1932, out west in Canada, working on the harvest. So I had finished that novel. I was about to polish it as I wrote a journal of response to that writing process. At that time, I realized I'd written 2 novels about iconic male Canadians, Dr. Norman Bethune and Terry Fox, and was planning to write a third. This would be about Glenn Gould. This led to a consideration of who among the iconic female Canadians I could write a novel about. The first female name on my list was L.M. Montgomery. Later, I came up with a 3-element plan for a proposed novel about L.M. Montgomery. So 3 dashes here. I'll number them. Number 1. The outer frame of an L.M. Montgomery novel would be her under pressure at a later time in her life. 2. Within that frame, she would remember the days when she was writing her first novel, Anne of Green Gables. And number 3, she would also imagine her character Anne as a character person who would interact with her author. So she would imagine the character Anne as somebody who would talk to her, that they could interact back and forth. This all came out of the reading that I'd done and would draw on for imagery. Anne of Green Gables, the L.M. Montgomery journals, and the biographies of L.M. Montgomery. I let the topic simmer as I worked on my novel, Glenn Gould, Light and Dark, the novel I was writing at the time. Okay, number 2, the second passage from the journal. My novel would have the author, L.M. Montgomery, and the character, Anne Shirley, in a duet-duel. Now, duet suggests harmony, duel suggests disharmony, duet-duel. Over the question of whether the author should write a series of new Anne novels with Anne as a perpetual child, or to have Anne gradually grow into adulthood with a full life arc available to her, with all the possibilities of pain and suffering that her author L.M. Montgomery had confided to the journals and kept secret from her contemporaries. So, L.M. Montgomery had a very difficult life. She recorded that life secretly in her journals. They weren't published till after she died. So when she's writing her final Anne novel, I thought to myself, what if she thought back to the day when she decided whether or not to let Anne grow up, and wondered if that had been a good decision, considering what an adult life in this world can be, how painful and difficult it can be to live in this world, as expressed in the journals of L.M. Montgomery. At that time, I also decided there would be lyrical passages in the novel which would be derived from the novel Anne of Green Gables. I thought it would be a good idea if these lyrical passages were ambivalent as to whether the author L.M. Montgomery or the character Anne was looking back to those lyrical experiences. So who wished she hadn't grown up? Who wished Anne hadn't grown up? L.M. Montgomery looking back with nostalgia, wistfulness at the Green Gables experience, or Anne herself looking back with nostalgia and wistfulness at the time when she was a little girl. So this gave me 3 points here. Number 1, a strong outer frame image envelope, the later life of the author, L.M. Montgomery. Number 2, a strong life experience duet duel, the discussion as to the future of the Anne novels, whether the little girl would ever get to grow up or not. And 3, a strong lyrical remembrance by one or other of the 2 main characters of my novel about the original Anne novel, Anne of Green Gables. So that's the second passage I've selected. Here's the third passage from the journal which I've selected. By September 2018, I decided I needed to clear up some of the fuzziness surrounding the concept of the 2 main time frames of the proposed novel. Number 1, the time of the later life of the main character, L.M. Montgomery, and her knowledge of the agony to which she did not want to expose her character Anne. So that would be a frame for the novel, 1938, the agony of the life she's led. Number 2, the time of the success of the novel Anne of Green Gables, when L.M. Montgomery had a decision to make as to whether to write a series of novels in which the Anne character would grow up or remain a child. Well, there was my premise, but did it make any sense? You're going to write a novel that's set in 1938 and 1905? Included in that discussion are 3 different proposed novel topics. So I planned 3 novels at the same time, right? Because they would all have similar questions to ask. So here they are. I wrote all 3 of them. I wrote Glenn Gould, Light and Dark, later on. I wrote Emily Bronte, More Myself Than I, later on. And of course I wrote L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life. But I was planning 3 novels at the same time. I often plan novels in bunches, as a particular concept often leads to a sense of the variations that could be explored within the larger parameters of such a topic. So when you get a pattern and you start thinking of variations, you think, oh, that could be 3 different novels about 3 different characters. Okay, now, where will I pick up on this? The attempt to clear up the common premises and the individual premise variations of those 3 proposed novels helped to clarify my ongoing plans for this novel, L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life. Planning in groups of potential novels like this means that I often have substantial notes when I come to work on a new novel topic full time. So sometimes it helps to plan 3 novels instead of 1. It helps you solve problems because you can see more possibilities. Also, when you do that and you start a new novel, you already have some notes on it because back whenever you did some thinking about it. Okay, here's the 4th section that I chose from the journal. In October 2018, I thought of something that I haven't thought of since, that the proposed novel would be analogous to our present world situation, that we as a world society are engaged in a debate as to the future of this planet. I do not see my novels as allegories, so there is no allegorical prediction as to the future of this planet in the completed rough draft. On the surface, the novel is about a fictional writer writing a novel about a fictional character, but I consider the novel to be a more universal exploration of the human experience than that. The novel is about the creation of idea patterns in our individual minds, but it's also about the same process in our collective minds. I did feel as I began to plan the novel that the premise does not limit the novel to an exploration of the concept of novel writing or of literary composition, as I feel that the concept of considering the validity of various categories of interpretive imagery, of myths, takes place between countries. Countries think, and they negotiate with other countries, and they have myths that sometimes harmonize and sometimes conflict, just as Anne and Ellen Montgomery sometimes harmonize and sometimes conflict. Between factions within society, within every country, there are competing ideas, competing myths, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes clashing. Between friends and family, within a family, you can have competing concepts as to what the family's about, harmonizing, clashing, and then within the individual mind, two concepts, two ideas about where you should go with your life that hopefully harmonize, possibly clash. I saw the novel, and still do, now that it's complete in rough draft, as an exploration of the ways in which imagery works for us and against us, as a language by which we do our thinking. The two main characters represent image forces in the mind of the main character, Ellen Montgomery, and both characters are complex enough to keep the novel from being a simple debate as to two simple blocks of interpreted imagery. So the novel is rich because both characters have complex ideas. Okay, here's the fifth passage that I've selected. By December 2018, when I was closing in on a complete rough draft of Glenn Gould, Light and Dark, I had a title which pleased me, Ellen Montgomery, I Gave You Life. I was still puzzling out the outer frame topics, as I had two ideas in my mind. They didn't seem to be easily reconcilable. So I kept coming back to this. How do you write a novel that's both set in 1938 and 1905? 1. That the outer frame image envelope of the whole novel would be the writing of Anne of Green Gables, and 2, that the outer frame would also be a time when an older Ellen Montgomery would have suffered through many years of what she considers to be agony, as evidenced by her journals. The solution was simple, but I didn't have it at the time. Another problem at that time seemed to be what the two main characters would know and not know. Do they know everything up to 1938? Do they only know up to 1905? Like, what? I'm the guy who has to answer this. Okay, number 1, would Ellen Montgomery know all about her agonizing life? Is she in 1905 or is she in 1938? Number 2, would she simply know that she has a contract to write more Anne novels after the success of her first Anne novel, Anne of Green Gables? So where is she mentally in terms of these two dates, 1905 and 1938? And 2 more points. 1, would Anne know about their later Anne novels which had been written? Or 2, would she simply know about only one Anne novel, Anne of Green Gables, and the contract to write more Anne novels and nothing more? The author has to decide these things. When the time came, I believe that I managed to solve these murky dilemmas quite well, but at the time, I was unable to free myself from clock and calendar time and to imagine the imagery as free-floating in the minds of the two main characters. Okay, those are the 5 passages I've chosen to read from the journal. Here's a note which occurred to me as I was reading this over. In the 3rd section which I read from this journal, I decided at one point that I would like to clear up the fuzziness surrounding the concept of the 2 main time frames of the proposed novel. I had the idea that one of what I would call the outer frames of the novel would be the time in 1938 when Ellen Montgomery was an older lady who had confided in her journals that her life had been quite miserable. I also had the idea that another outer frame for my novel would be the writing of Anne of Green Gables, which took place 33 years earlier, in 1905. The question was, how am I going to write a novel with 2 outer frames from such different time periods in the life of the main character? Now, it's often said that one of the most difficult things about being a writer is facing the blank page. How can one get an idea when all that one sees in front of one is a blank page? Well, I have different names for the kind of writing that I do. One of them is form writing. Another one is component writing. Over the course of 29 novels and what is now 7 novellas, I have developed a form for the novel and, get my page turned here, and a form for the novella. The point I'm making here is that I did not start the writing process for this novel with a blank page. What I started with was the John Passfield form for the poetic novel. There was already ink on the page. I knew that I would write a novel of 16 chapters on the topic of L.M. Montgomery. I knew that in every one of these 16 chapters there would be 8 image units of outer frame action, by which I simply mean the story. I knew that in many of my novels I had split each of the 8 image units with a single line image, which then gave me 2 segments within each image unit, a present moment story. So I did not face a blank page. Number 1. I took the dilemma which I had, how to write a novel with an outer frame present moment story, in which there would be 2 stories happening 33 years apart. And number 2, I took the form which I had devised with image units of 2 segments, and I decided that each outer frame image unit in chapter 1 would have both. Number 1, the present moment of 1938, which turned out to be the writing of the novel Anne of Ingleside, and number 2, the present moment of 1905, which I already knew would be the time of the writing of Anne of Green Gables. So I had a form. All I had to do was fit the information into it. And a major problem in the planning of form for the novel L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, was solved. I did not have to face the problem of the blank page. Well, this is my novel, L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, a novel by John Passfield. It's found on Amazon. It's found at my publisher's website, roxmillspress.com, and on my website, johnpassfield.ca. You can access the planning notebook, which I've just read from, by clicking on the cover icon. You can access the journal. Sorry, I just read from the journal. And you can access the journal and the planning notebook by clicking on the cover icons and read all about the novel L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life. Lastly, thank you for watching this video.